What's up, everybody? Welcome to Move the Sticks. DJ Bucky back with you. Buck, how you doing, man?
Man, I'm good. I'm good. Just trying to work through all the uncertainty that is kind of clouding the world and the football world in particular.
Yeah, that's what we're going to get to today because we want to talk about some of the changes, what it could look like from multiple fronts here with the college season. I think, and we'll get into this, but I do think there's a high likelihood we get some form of spring football. You know, whether that could be the Ivy League, the Patriot League, some of these other Division I AA schools, the Group of Five, maybe even some Power Five football in the spring. But we are going to get some spring football. What does that look like? We're going to tackle that topic in just a little bit. But at the top, Buck, it's sounding like from the people we're talking to, there's a chance we have no preseason games. Bring about 80 guys into camp. So lower roster numbers, a longer ramp-up time to get these guys ready so we don't have a ton of injuries. And then do your best to keep these guys healthy to get to week one. And that comes with a lot of ramifications.
Yeah, it does come with a lot of ramifications, but I do understand it. I'll talk about it from the player side and the NFLPA side. Going back to 2011 when they had the lockout, when guys returned without an OTA, without off-season workouts, they were kind of thrust into training camp, and it was away they go. And what happened that preseason, there were a lot of injuries, a lot of soft tissue injuries, a lot of Achilles tears, some ACLs. And what the NFLPA and what the players are trying to do, they just want to slow down the quick acceleration to being able to play football. So some of the things that have been outlined, and our Tom Pelissero and NFL Network has outlined a 48-day run-up to being able to play, 3 days of medical and equipment, 21 days of strength and conditioning work where they're in the weight room, they're on the field, trying to assess their conditioning and building themselves up. 2 weeks, 14 days of non-padded practices where they're now on the field, kind of replicating the OTA portion of the offseason. And then 10 days where you can have padded work with 8 to 10 padded practices in there before you have your first game. If they take that approach, DJ, I actually think it will be better. And I think it would give them an opportunity to have the product looking like the product that we're accustomed to. Look, it won't be perfect. It won't be flawless. But I do believe if you take your time and give teams 6 weeks to get ready, I do believe we will see better football than trying to run up and get everything done before players are physically ready to go.
And answer me this question, because you also, we're talking about a loss of revenue with the, either the limiting number of fans or the fact we have no fans in the stands. So there's a revenue gap there that they're saying could be somewhere like $4 billion or something like that in loss of revenue. I know personally, and I don't know, if it may be just because we're hardcore, but I have a sneaky feeling there's a lot of people like us. If we had no preseason games, but say, we live in Los Angeles, the Los Angeles area, if they were to say, hey, instead of giving you 4 Charger preseason games, 4 Rams preseason games, we're going to broadcast 4 live practices where there'll be some sort of inter-squad mingle. It could be 7-on-7, but I know personally, if you told me right now that I can go in the other room and watch Casey Hayward and Keenan Allen in one-on-ones,
yeah,
I'm going to go watch it. There's nothing on TV that's going to be more entertaining than that to me as a football guy. And I have a feeling that you're not going to get the numbers that you would get. The preseason wasn't great anyways, but there's going to be something. There's going to be something there you can put on and give to your fans so you can see your guys. I know as a baseball fan, I can't figure out why they haven't put these inter-squad games these teams have been playing every day on TV. Like, I'll watch those. I'll watch those every day.
Yeah, no, it's funny that you mentioned that because the first thing that came to mind when you brought that idea up, every team has what they call a fan fest. That is typically a day that coincides with the first live scrimmage. And it's a little ceremonial in terms of what that scrimmage looks like. But DJ, if you told the fans that we're going to show 3 or better yet 2 inter-squad scrimmages that are full bore, a full day, as you talk about a full live scrimmage that culminates in one-on-ones, good versus good, seeing our favorite players play against the other squad, I absolutely believe that you could get it. And with the way that we have these streaming services, I've seen high school games streamed. I'm sure there's a way that you can do it, particularly with the boom that Netflix has experienced. I think there's a way to utilize a streaming service to broadcast these games and to really take advantage of the desire and the thirst of your fan base while also putting a little money in the owners' pockets.
Yeah, so if we look at it from that standpoint, we looked at it from the player standpoint, not wanting to get injured and having that slow ramp up. Let's get to week one, which I think all of our goal is, right? Let's just, it's going to be bumps in the road, but if we can just get the thing started, then maybe we can learn and adjust as we go along. I just don't want it to get torpedoed before we even get to the first week of the season. So personally, I'm okay with the no preseason games and following this plan. We've looked at it from the player standpoint. How about from a team standpoint, from an organizational standpoint, what you gain, what you might lose in this situation?
I think we have to break it up, and I think we should have this discussion in like 4 different categories. The first category, the veterans. What does it mean for the veterans not having preseason games? Mm-hmm. Well, I think the veterans would push not having preseason games because it puts them in an advantageous situation. Not the stars, not the top 15 on the roster, but kind of like the middle class, the class that will curry favor with coaches because of their experience and their knowledge. In these situations, coaches want to be able to trust their players, and they have a tendency to trust veteran players because they know how they're going to play. They're familiar with their games, their strengths and weaknesses, and they're okay compensating for some of their deficiencies because they know their knowledge will allow them to do more stuff.
Yeah, and we're going to get to a similar topic here on what's going to happen with these college kids with the spring and the decision and who that benefits and who's going to suffer from it. To me, I think I use the golf analogy. Like those middle of the road veterans, they're already in the clubhouse. They've posted their score. We know what they are, right? And maybe they're one under, one over. Not great, but I know what they are. Versus some other guy who might be able to go out there and shoot 66, but he also might shoot 76. I don't know. There's the unknown there. So there's a comfort level with knowing what you have with some of those veteran guys.
Yeah, it's funny that you talk about comfort level because I think the second category of players that we have to talk about are the draft picks. I think this year more than any other year, I think we may see a 100% make rate when it comes to the draft picks because there haven't been off-season workouts. We haven't seen them in OTAs. Right now, you're invested in the draft picks because you put money into the draft picks. So it will be harder to dismiss the third-round pick that didn't perform well throughout the offseason. And you're like, you know what? I'm going to go with the undrafted free agent because I know him better. Because now we made the selection to pick this guy, we're going to give him every opportunity to make the team. And better yet, if he doesn't make the team, he's kind of like that preferred status when it comes to the practice squad. More patience, more understanding, more time to develop. We're going to exhibit more patience when it comes to those draft picks because we're invested in them, because what we saw on tape and in the offseason workouts, meaning the combine, we believe they were going to be guys that could help our team in some way, shape, or form.
All right, so my reaction to this is going to kind of bleed these two topics together because I was having this conversation with the general manager the other day, and I want to get your take on it, Buck. He brought up a fascinating point. He said he believes you are going to see more trades like around the trade deadline at this season than we've ever seen before. Here's his logic. Hear me out on this. If there is no college season or there's a limited college season, it's going to make the evaluation process more difficult for this upcoming draft than it's ever been. So if you have an opportunity and you're going to trade a first-round pick in 2021, which you might look at that and say, man, that is a crapshoot. I'm flying blind on that first-round pick next year. Look at all these guys who have emerged in their last year of college that now, we don't have a chance to know who those guys are. Some of these guys fall off. It's just so much unknown. So if I can take a player, throw whatever veteran out there, we're talking about the Chargers. Let's say it was Keenan Allen, right? Just throwing a name out there. But if the Chargers got off to a slow start and they decided they wanted to trade Keenan Allen, a team might say, look, I'll trade a first-round pick next year. I know what Keenan Allen brings. I know what said veteran player brings. I have no idea what that first-round pick is going to look like next year because I'm going to have less information than I've ever had before. So we could see a flurry of these trades with teams being more willing to part with picks for next year than they ever have been in the past.
Absolutely, and I think it makes sense. I think not only those veteran established players like you were talking about, like a Keenan Allen, someone that we've seen play at a high level, pawned them off for first-round picks, but I also think with the potential for the cap to either stay flat or even drop with the reduction, I think you can see trades for lower price veterans, guys that are in their first, second year, where you can still get them at a manageable
cost control.
Cost control. So now I can get them cheaper and I can build up my team in a cost efficient manner to ensure about hey, if we don't have enough money to pay some of these high-end veterans, we can get some of the lower guys that still have developmental potential, that still may be on their rookie contract or their exclusive rights contract or a restricted free agent, where we do get them at cost control at a rate that better slots in to the way the new salary cap could be.
All right, get on to the next group of players.
The undrafted free agents. Look, this year with the undrafted free agents would be different than any other year. The opportunities will be scarce for them to really prove themselves, because without preseason games, their flashes will come in practice. But the only thing about that, coaches will still be hesitant, because they'll say, hey, we've seen these practice day All-Americans, but when they get to the game, they play completely different. I think now more than ever, with the expanded practice squad rosters, we will see maybe 8 of those 16 slots reserved for those undrafted free agents that we might feel good about, but we're not all the way confident that they can be contributors right away. And we want to develop them guys on our watch on the practice squad.
Yeah, and you figure you can get both, right? Because a lot of times you make those roster decisions and it's, man, okay, we have a guy we took in the 4th round 2 years ago. We don't love him. He's a good player, but man, we think this undrafted player is better. But the thought process is, in a normal year where everybody else in the league might see that undrafted player in preseason games and go, okay, wow, if they don't put that undrafted player on the roster, we're gonna claim him. And then that way, you're in a situation where they don't see that player. So you can afford to keep the veteran on the active roster and then be able to sneak that guy to your practice squad without any worries about him getting claimed by somebody else. It allows you to keep both players to extend the evaluation process.
Absolutely. And we talked about this because I think the way that you eloquently said it, you talked about the practice squad this year more than ever could look like a baseball minor league farm system, meaning we may have 3 or 4 players that are ready to go. They're AAA players. Then we got our AA players, we got our single A, and our rookie ball. And so as we tier those out, especially with 16, you could probably put 4 in each category if you wish. And it would give you an opportunity to set developmental plans, because I want you to think not only about this year, but I want you to think about next year. Next year, with the uncertainty of the draft, the developmental game, the teams that are not only able to think about the here and now, but also down the road when it comes to developing those young, unheralded players, they have an advantage. I need to be able to have long-term plans, a long-term vision for how to develop these 12 or so guys that might be undrafted free agents on the practice squad, because I'm going to need them to be contributors, because they're also going to be cheap labor.
All right, I want to ask you a question before we finish this here. Do you think, and we've seen this a lot in other sports, the salary dump trade, right? Just dumping salary. In the NFL, we don't really see a lot of that. The revenues are so high and teams are all competitive and on equal footing with the salary cap, so you don't see a lot of salary dumping. But I wonder if the uncertainty, and hopefully they'll get this all figured out with borrowing from future years in the cap, and hopefully they can keep it, somewhat flat, or it'll just be a little increase instead of the huge increases that would be coming with the new TV deals. But if you're a team that says, man, we don't really have a shot to win this year, let's try and give ourselves an advantage for the offseason when some teams might be butting up against the cap that might not be expanding like we originally thought. Let's dump as much salary as we can and try and get down into a place where we can be very nimble and very flexible. We see that in other sports. We really haven't seen that in football.
Yeah, I think that's something that is at play. I think that's something that has to be at play. We talk about these salary cap deals that we see all the time in basketball. We see teams trade a player so they can get their mid-level exception back and use it on another player. Well, I think with the salary cap and the uncertainty of next year and future years, you really have to have enough flexibility to be able to move regardless of how it goes, whether it's flat or whether there's a reduction. So, yeah, I think we'll see trades. I think we'll see teams try and keep more younger players in the bottom third of their roster to give them the flexibility to build their team. And I also think there's going to be, we've seen it already, teams have not been signing guys to long-term deals because of the uncertainty with the future years. We will see teams, I think now more than ever, it will be a team of a handful of stars and then a lot of cheap, lower players. And the teams that are the best evaluators when it comes to drafting and developing, they're going to be able to kind of maneuver in these odd circumstances.
Yeah, there's so many different things to factor in here. There's also, if you're a team that's maybe you've got a new coach, new quarterback, it's kind of it's a transition year for you, and you look at the challenge with the limiting off season. And these teams might, early on in the season, maybe they get their doors blown off in the first couple of games because they just haven't had an opportunity to gel and get together and figure this thing out. That you might see them punt on the season earlier and say, this is a weird year. We're in a pandemic. We haven't had an off season, new head coach, new quarterback. Let's just start trying to get ready for next year. We can shed some contracts. We can try and collect some picks. That's why it's going to be fascinating, because do you want to go that route, or do you get scared of what we were talking about earlier and say, I don't know, having a bunch of draft picks might not be a good thing in this upcoming draft. And maybe we start seeing creativity of trading for picks outside 21. Maybe you start seeing teams saying, hey, 2022 will be the next normal scouting cycle. So save me. No, I don't want your first round pick in 21. Give me your first round pick in 22. That could be another interesting thing. There's so many different dynamics in play.
Yeah, two different dynamics, and two dynamics I want to touch on. First, you mentioned coaches. I think this year, more than any other year, the coaches that, one, have veteran players, they're going to have an advantage over the new guys. The continuity and system, we talked about Sean Payton early in the offseason said, hey, guys, get away from it. Worry about your families. We'll pick up in training camp, because a lot of their guys have been there. They know. Simple systems, being able to condense the playbook, really focusing on short-term goals. John Fox, when I was with the Carolina Panthers, used to talk about, let's just treat, we can go 3-1 every quarter. That'll get you to 12-4. I think it's going to be very important to have short-term goals. I want to ask you, and having some of these conversations with scouting buddies, how will no preseason impact the front office view when it comes to evaluation? Because so much of preseason scouting is not about your own team, but looking at the other 31 teams, having someone assign. What do we do now? How do scouts navigate that part of the situation?
Yeah, I mean, that you're evaluating the back end rosters, and for those that don't know, you are assigning different scouts. The college scouts will help on the pro side during preseason because there's so many players to evaluate, and you're looking at the back end roster guys. So we would normally do anybody that was picked after the 5th round. So rookies that were 5th, 6th, 7th round picks, all the undrafted rookies, as well as any roster bubble players you might look at the roster and say, okay, this guy could get cut, 2nd or 3rd year players. But that would usually amount to about 30 guys, maybe 30 to 40 guys per team. You're not evaluating the top end players. You'll worry about those guys when they're getting closer to free agency. But those back 30 to 40 players. So you do that number times 31 other teams. That is a huge player pool that you're evaluating. Well, now you're going to miss out on that evaluation opportunity. You're not going to see those guys in the preseason. You're not going to get a chance to look at them and eyeball them. So it's going to be a totally different setup with how this works. I think you're going to have guys going back and doubling up and watching even more college tape from the previous year. It's going to be trying to get your ready lists. We've talked about like a guy like Colin Kaepernick being on some ready lists. You have every position, you have a list of 15 guys that if something were to happen to one of your players, this would be the next man up that you would bring in for a workout. Bring in 3 of them, work them out, sign one. So as you're getting those ready lists, I think you're going to look at these teams and you're going to say, okay, well, they kept this guy on the practice squad. We didn't really have high grades on him. Maybe this guy went to Western New Mexico, right? And this guy made the practice squad for the Dolphins. We had one scout going to Western New Mexico. He didn't give the guy a draftable grade. That was it. Well, the fact that the Dolphins thought enough of him to put him on the practice squad, I can't go watch him in preseason games. What I can do is I can assign his Western New Mexico tape to 3 or 4 other guys in our department and say, maybe that guy had a bad cup of coffee the day he went in there, and maybe this kid has some redeeming qualities. So that type of assignments, those type of assignments, I think is what you're going to see in personnel departments. It's going to be weird.
Yeah, it's going to be weird, but I think that is interesting because, DJ, some teams don't involve their pro scouts in the college scouting process. I think it would be interesting when we talk about the bottom of the roster guys. Now that we are getting word that there may not be a preseason, being able to say, hey, I know you typically don't live in that world, but here's what I want you to do. Let's take 3 games from that kid from Western New Mexico and look at him and give me an eval based on that. And we may have to make our practice squad's decisions off of that college tape, which is completely different. But not the college guy that looked at him, but maybe the pro guy. Hey, can you look at him, project, and see what traits you like about him? Look at his workout. Look at the combine stuff if he was at the combine. Let's see where that fits out in terms of the percentiles. Where does he fit? Where does he project as a pro?
Let me give you another idea here. This is we'll give you a team like the Carolina Panthers, who we've all said probably in a rebuild mode, right? Matt Rule, new quarterback or new head coach. You bring over Joe Brady, new coordinator. You've got a new quarterback there, and Teddy Bridgewater, limiting offseason, all that. We've talked about, it's going to be tough for that team to win in this coming season. If practice squads are expanded, that could be a big number, right? And we already know it is expanded because of the new CBA, but it could be expanded even more. I would be tempted in the Carolina Panthers front office to say, okay, we have our, a 54-man roster now? I think it went up one, or 55, I think, whatever it is. So I would say we're going to allocate 4 spots a week. So maybe every 2 weeks, maybe every 3 weeks, every 2 or 3 weeks, we're going to have 4 rotating spots. So you look around those practice squads around the league, find the 4 interesting players. We're going to sign them to our active roster. We're going to get a free look at them for a little bit, see who we like. Maybe we keep one, maybe we keep none. But 3 weeks later, we're going to cycle, keep one of those guys. Now we cycle out 3 new ones, and we're going to get a chance to look at these guys, get free looks on these players that are on practice squads around the NFL. And if you come out of the season and you end up with 5 or 6 new roster guys that you've plucked off practice squads because you could really churn your roster and get free looks at these players, provided you're not worried about the depth in the back end of your roster, because you're not going to win anything this year.
So I'm glad that you brought that up. And I'm glad that you brought up Matt Rule and the Carolina Panthers, because I believe guys who are just recently removed from the college world have an advantage. DJ, you remember last year when college football put in the redshirt rule, where you could play a player for 4 games and they still could retain that extra year. Basically, what you're outlining is using the redshirt rule in the pro game, meaning go get a practice squad guy, put him on the roster, put him on the field for a few weeks so you can evaluate him, and then you can decide whether to kick or punt on him. And early on, when Pete Carroll went to the Seattle Seahawks, what did the Seattle Seahawks do? They churned the bottom part of their roster more than any other team. You talk about the week after week, numerous transactions, guys coming in, guys going out. I think that is a smart way for Matt Rule and some of these other teams that are trying to jumpstart a rebuild program to use that approach.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of ways you can be creative here with what's going on. Are there any other aspects that we're not seeing on this thing, Buck, or is that it from the pro side?
I mean, I think that's it. I think we really hit on it when it came to the preseason games. We talked about the vets, the draft picks, the undrafted, the coaches, and the scouts. I think the thing that is now impacted, because we're talking about the preseason, but now the word has come out in the college game. Teams are already putting on the potential of a fall season. The Patriot League, the Ivy League, junior colleges have all said that they're going to play spring football. DJ, for us as scouts, what does that mean now? Like, what is the approach? What have you heard? What do you think about scouting spring football while getting ready for a draft that also takes place in the spring?
Yeah, I think you're looking at 2 scenarios, right? Let's do the scenario where we get Power 5 football, which I think there's still hope out there that we could get Power 5 football. The big 5 conferences, they go off in the fall. Maybe it's conference only schedules, what it looks like, initially right now. Then I think we're going to get some brand of spring football. We had the Patriot League, which is Division I AA. I don't do the FBS, FCS thing. It just confuses me. So you've got the Patriot League, the Ivy League. It sounds like I think we're going to end up seeing all those Division I AAs. And I think we're going to see a lot of the group. I believe personally, not for anything else out there, the concrete report, I believe the group of 5. I don't see the group of 5 going in the fall. So there's some good programs. You think about the group of 5, talking about Boise State, talking about Houston. My alma mater is a top 25 team. I mean, I think it's going to be difficult for those teams to go because let me give you the backstory. The reasoning, their revenue, they don't have big TV deals. So their revenue comes from the gate. So if you can't have fans in the stands, your revenue takes a major hit. So you're not able to generate the revenue. It just makes more sense for them to punt to the spring and the hope that you could get fans in the stands. Then you can get your revenue back up. And I think you would actually do pretty good rating wise. I know, for me, if I had a chance to watch, Houston, play Louisiana Tech in the spring, I'll watch it. I'll definitely watch. I'd be a heck of a lot more interested in that than watching the AAF or XFL or any of the other, spring football leagues we've had. But that's what I think is going to happen. So we're going to have some form of spring football. I think scouting-wise, you will see. I would say, especially if it's the group of 5 and it's the non-power 5s, you would have a pool of. What do you think, Buck? I would say 20 to 30 players that would opt out from that level because they're already feel secure they're going to be top 100 picks. So they wouldn't play. We'd be evaluating them for the draft. The rest of those guys, we would be evaluating the underclassmen for next year. But the seniors, you'd be evaluating for them being undrafted free agents, type of a situation. That would be my guess, how that would all work.
Yeah, DJ, I think this actually could be a good thing for football in general, right? It could be a good thing in general down the line, because we have tried to fill the springtime void with football on the pro level, and unsuccessfully, like for whatever reason, it just hasn't worked. The one thing that we know, colleges are very passionate. Like, DJ, if you can close your eyes and just think about how many people pay attention to spring football games when they play them on ESPN, when they play them on ESPNU, they play them on Fox and all those other things, there's a rabid interest for football. Some of those schools, particularly the smaller ones, the group of 5 schools, that their big paydays come from playing Power 5 conferences or whatever, they may find a better financial model by going in the spring. From a scouting standpoint, I don't think it would impact us as much because you're talking about a smaller pool. The guys that we're talking about typically coming from those schools and conferences are typically your later round draft picks, your undrafted free agents, those guys. And so I think there's enough time to get information on those guys. And I think our assessments on those guys will probably be truer to the process because it's closer to the draft. For the Power 5 guys, it would allow us to really dig into the Power 5 conferences if they happen to play in the fall, to really hone in, to see all those games, to have a solid ramp up to the combine and the draft. And you'll have to be working concurrently on both sides with your scouting staff. But I think it could be something that could work. I think we could pull it off. I think there are enough people in front offices to be able to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you tell me. You got a chance to watch these spring leagues with the AAF and the XFL. To me, I think if you had group of 5 football in the spring, I think it would destroy those games in ratings. I don't even think it would be close. You'd be watching games in full stadiums at a lot of these places. It'd be big time intrigue with it. And it's good football. Like, there's good football programs there. And you almost could have 2 national championships, right? You have the kind of the Power 5 national champion and the group of 5 national champion.
I think it's great because I think if you do that, I mean, I don't want to give away all our secrets because somebody will take this model. But let's just imagine with the group of 5, right? So you talk about the Power 5, and they're doing whatever they do with college football playoff. We haven't seen a group of 5 team crack the playoff to this point. So imagine, let the Power 5 do their deal with their national champion. But then with the group of 5, why not use the same model that the smaller schools use, where you have a group of 5 and then you have a legitimate playoff, whether it's 8 teams, whether it's 16 teams, and let them continue to ramp it up, just like Division 1 AA does, Division 2, Division 3. I think there would be a level of interest and excitement that would lead to revenues that they generate that they hadn't generated before.
Yeah, I mean, we could go full European soccer model and just go way off the reservation too, and say, hey, you win the group of 5 championship, you're in the Power 5 the next year.
How about that?
Huh? There we go. And now we're back playing in the fall.
And if you're one of those bottom rung teams in the Power 5,
see you in the spring. It'll never happen. It makes too much sense. It will never happen. But I do think what we are going to see happen is we are going to see some form of spring football, whatever that looks like. And I'm excited for it. And maybe it's a one and done. Maybe it's 1 year only because of what's going on in the world. But I don't think it's the end of the world. I do, though. I tweeted this out the other day. I want to get your thoughts on it. I don't understand why the league. Well, I guess I understand why they did it, but it bugs me that they eliminated the supplemental draft this year. And the reason that that you hear is that they were worried about guys like Trevor Lawrence and some of these other guys trying to get into the supplemental. My thing is not about them. My thing is, like, right now we know the Ivy League and the Patriot League are not going to play football this year. So if you look historically and the guys, you'll think of them off the top of your head, but the rules, right? Guys get kicked out of school. Guys have multiple failed drug tests, get in trouble. They get kicked out of 2 different schools, and those guys end up being eligible to start their professional career where they can begin getting paid and developing as a professional. Now you have, let's say you've got, and this is, just making this up, You've got a draftable offensive line. You've got a mid-round draftable offensive lineman at Delaware, or one of these schools, right? And everybody, the scouts know who he is. Now they cancel football. He's not given the option to do what the guy who got kicked out of school was given. I mean, this kid did nothing wrong. I mean, he just had his football season, the rug pulled out from under him. And now instead of being able to go into supplemental draft, we haven't started training camp yet. There's plenty of time to do that. He could get on with the team, have a chance to train in a real facility with proper technique and everything else, and get his professional career started, make a little money. Now he's got to wait. What the heck is this kid going to do for the whole? He's got nothing to do all the way up until the draft in April. And then people said, oh, if you do that, it would overwhelm the system. No, it wouldn't. We know the scouts, if you ask the teams, who are the 3 to 5 NFL prospects in the Patriot League, who are the 3 to 5 NFL prospects in the Ivy League, they already know who these guys are. You're talking about a handful of players. But those guys, in my opinion, got kind of hosed. Like they should have been given an opportunity to go into the supplemental draft. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I think the supplemental draft should have been wide open, given the uncertainty of what is going on, the uncertainty of the season, the uncertainty of even the spring. Like we don't know for sure if the spring is going to be able to play out because no one knows how the pandemic is going to turn out. They should be given the opportunity to move on to the next level. I think I would have been fascinated if they did run this supplemental draft as usual. I would love to see what would happen with a Trevor Lawrence and a Justin Fields if they had thrown their name into the hat. Because with the supplemental being able to give a first-round pick next year, I just would have been intrigued by, hey, who would give up that first-round pick right away this year, knowing that I could get Trevor Lawrence next year and beyond. I just think it would be a
but the challenge with that is those guys technically would have had to file a grievance because they wouldn't have been eligible.
I know.
But like these Ivy League, these seniors to be, the guys that are going to be seniors, and you could even put that in the case of guys like Travis Etienne and Devontae Smith and Quentin Moses, a lot of those guys were eligible for last year's draft, decided to go back to school. Now, I don't think this is what they anticipated was going to happen with them coming back to school. So the situation has changed. I just feel like those guys should have been given the opportunity, and I do think that there was probably a fear that, well, if those guys get in, then you're going to start having guys try and do what Mike Williams did back in the day, which is, sue and petition the NFL to get in, even though they technically aren't eligible.
Yeah, I think the thing that is interesting, and we've had this conversation, we're hopeful that Power 5 goes in the fall. But what if Power 5 goes in the spring with everybody else? How does that change with some of the marquee players that are out there? Do we see these guys play a couple of games and then shut it down? Do we see these guys play full seasons? Do these guys stay with their teams while pursuing the national title? It's different because it's a tighter run up to the draft. And so injuries and all those other things would have a bigger impact if they occur in the spring as opposed to when they happen in the fall.
I think the top tier programs would have a minimum of 4 to 5 guys that would not play. That's just my opinion. I think you would see that. I think agents would get to them. Agents would tell them, look, you're a first-round pick, you're a top 50 pick, you're a top 100 pick. If you're in one of those categories, right, you're going to say, okay, let's look at the advantages of you coming back. You're a first-round pick. Maybe you move up into the top 10. Maybe you play really well and vault yourself up in the top 10. Now let's look at the disadvantages. You get sick. You get hurt. You don't play as well. The team around you is not as good. Like there's just more things you can stack up in the reasons not to play than the reasons to play for those guys that are in that top tier. And you know how it is, Buck. If you polled the college football players right now, if you said, how many of you believe you are a top 50 pick, right now you'd have 150 hands would go up.
Yeah.
Because these guys have been told they're top 50 picks by everybody around them, agents, coaches, everybody. So you're going to have a lot of those guys thinking, well, I'm already a top 50 pick. I'm not going to play in the spring. Why would I do that? I'm going to get hurt. I'm going to get sick. I'm not going to play as well. There's just too many negative outcomes.
Yeah, there's a lot of risk in going to the spring. You talk about like getting sick, the injury risk, the declining play, the poor performance. For those guys, it's negative. I think the other thing, it might be harder for a guy to have a Joe Burrow rise up the charts just because everything is so close. What we got a chance to do last year is we got a chance to really sit and digest Joe Burrow's ascension up the board. We got a chance to really watch him game after game throughout the fall, make a case to be the number 1 overall pick.
But here's my question. Here's my question, though, on that, Buck, because this is my question. If Joe Burrow, who we said coming into the season was a 3rd-round pick, if LSU is 6-0 and he is tearing it up, the first time they have a big opponent, whoever that might be, right? Say that, I'm going to have to go back and look at their schedule, but say it's, it was Alabama was a little bit later in the year. Georgia, I think, was later. But the first, Texas A&M, he destroys Texas A&M, the 6th game of the season. Everybody's going to get in his ear like, dude, you're a top 5 pick. You just put 6 unbelievable games out there. You torch Texas A&M, shut it down. And I'm telling you, that's going to be the message that's sent to a lot of those players. So you're going to have some guys that are not going to play to begin with. You're going to have other guys that get off to a hot start and be like, all right, I put enough out there. That's a little taste. I'm healthy. I'm out.
In a way, not saying that Nick Bosa did this, but when Nick Bosa got hurt, like he was done for the year, he played 3 games his final year, and he was like, hey, my take speaks for itself. You have to make the decision. I think you will see some guys do that. And any nick, any minor ding or injury, I think is over.
Wrap.
I think the days of trying to play through and be a hero or exhibit some courage or bravery, I don't think that happens this spring with everything being so close to the draft.
Yeah, and then I didn't even thought about this part. There's so many different angles to this thing. What do you do if you have spring football and you get your recruits that come in, graduate early? Like, you throw those guys right out of high school, throw them right on the field? They'd be eligible to do that, correct?
Yeah, I think you could use it. You could use the redshirt rule to your advantage. Give them their 4 games. I think what you could do is you could put them on the field and see if they can handle it and do it.
But what if you're in a state? What if you're in a state like we're in California? We're hopeful, but not necessarily, optimistic. We're going to see high school football here in the fall.
Yeah,
but what if you're in North Dakota and the virus hasn't been bad there, and you play your 12-game high school season in the fall? You play your championship game in early December. You enroll at the school in January, and you could be playing a college football game in February. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily in the best interest of the student athlete.
No, I definitely don't think that's in the best interest. But I think what you have to do is you're a coach. You have to evaluate how good is that player coming in. I think what's interesting, North Carolina has a kid coming in, Antonio Grimes, big-time corner that they signed. He signed for next year's class, but he's decided to reclassify so he can go in this year. And so it's very, very similar. I think you're going to see some guys that do that. So when we talk about in California, potentially not having high school ball, and then you have a handful of guys that already like to go and early enroll. So does that mean they just bypass their senior season and go right to college? It's interesting. I mean, a unique set of circumstances. Everyone has to be nimble and adaptable, but this year of football would be unlike any other year that we've ever seen. Yeah,
it's going to be wild, man. Is there anything else you want to add before we jump out of here, Buck?
No, that was it, man. That was the discussion. I think it's interesting. I think the pandemic is making everybody look at football differently. And I think what I would like to happen soon, because DJ training camp is 2 weeks away and we don't have a decision. I just kind of want to know, are we going to have a preseason? What does training camp look like? How do we get ready for it? How are teams going to get ready? Because, look, man, I'm anxious. The body clock is telling me that, hey, it's time. I just want to know, is it legitimately going to be go time?
Yep. Well, we'll wait. Maybe the next time we get together here in a couple of days, we'll have an answer. Hopefully soon we'll find out. But that's all I got today, man. That was fun. It's just fun looking at all the different possibilities and how one decision is going to affect so many different people. I thought we tackled that today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think this is a unique set of circumstances. I think coaches, players, scouts, everybody has to be nimble. They have to be able to move and kind of navigate. You got to be able to adapt and overcome. And this will be unique circumstances that you have to overcome. But I think it's one that everyone can be able to do it. You just have to have a plan.
No doubt. All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you guys so much for checking us out. We'll be back here in a couple days with Move the Sticks. He's Bucky Brooks. I'm Daniel Jeremiah. We'll see you next time.